I need to tell you about the road between my old apartment and the new one. I've driven that stretch of highway maybe 100 times. It's nothing special, just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through a long valley of pine trees and granite cliffs. But there's a curve, about 11 miles from the last gas station, where the trees grow so close together that they block out the moon. And on that curve, there's a guardrail that's been dented for as long as anyone can remember. I never thought much about it until last October. I was moving out of my ex's place. We'd split 2 months earlier, but I'd been dragging my feet on the last load of boxes because I didn't want to admit that 3 years of my life fit into the back of a Honda Civic. It was almost midnight by the time I finally pulled out of the driveway. The air had that sharp, cold smell of leaves starting to rot, and every streetlight looked like a wet bruise against the fog. I had the radio on, some late-night talk show, where the host was laughing too loud at his own jokes. I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about the way she used to leave her coffee mug on my nightstand, and how I'd still find it there some mornings, even though she'd been gone for weeks. The brain does that. It keeps expecting things that aren't coming back. The fog got thicker as I left the suburbs. I turned off the main road onto the highway, and the streetlights just stopped, like someone had pulled a plug. Suddenly, it was just me and my headlights cutting a pale tunnel through the mist. The pine trees on either side looked like dark curtains, and every few seconds a reflector on the guardrail would flash orange, then red, then nothing. I checked my rearview mirror. Empty, no other cars. Just a long ribbon of black asphalt disappearing into the white. That's when I noticed the temperature dropping inside the car. Not the kind of slow chill you get from a drafty window. This was sharp, sudden, like someone had opened a freezer door right next to my face. I reached over and turned up the heat, but the air coming out of the vents stayed cold. Not cool, cold. I could see my breath fogging against the windshield. I told myself it was just the fog, just the altitude. The valley had a creek running through it, so of course it would be colder there. That made sense. That was logical. Then the radio cut out. Not static, not a bad signal. The display went dark for a second, then flickered back on with a sound I still can't describe properly. It was like someone had tuned the dial to a frequency that didn't exist. A low, humming silence that had something underneath it. A whisper. No, not a whisper. The shape of a whisper. Like if you took the idea of a voice and pressed it into the air without letting it make a sound. I turned off the radio. The silence that followed was worse. It was too quiet. The road noise, the hum of the engine, the rattle of boxes in the back seat, all of it just vanished. I was sitting in a silent car moving through a silent world. The only proof that I wasn't frozen in place was the speedometer needle trembling at 55 miles an hour. I looked up, and that's when I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, just past the guardrail. A woman, young, maybe late 20s. She was wearing a thin white dress, the kind you'd see at a summer picnic, but it was soaked through like she'd just climbed out of the creek. Her hair was dark and wet, plastered to her face. She had one arm raised, palm out, like she was trying to wave me down, but her fingers weren't moving. None of her was moving. She was completely, perfectly still. Even her hair, even the hem of her dress, even the fog around her seemed to hold its breath. My first thought was that she'd been in an accident. That maybe her car was in the ditch and she needed help. That's the stupid thing about being human. You see something that doesn't make sense, and your brain still tries to put it in a box labeled normal. I slowed down, not all the way. I was still doing about 30 when I passed her. And as I passed, she turned her head to look at me. Her neck didn't move, her shoulders didn't shift. Her whole body stayed locked in that same frozen posture. But her head rotated, slowly, like a doll on a hinge, until she was facing me. And her eyes were open too wide. Not like she was scared, like she couldn't close them, like someone had removed the lids. And her mouth was open too, just slightly, as if she had been about to say something and then forgot how. There was no expression on her face, no fear, no pain, no pleading. Just a kind of patient emptiness. Hit the gas. Spun tires for a second, then caught, and I was doing 60, then 70, then 80. The fog was getting thicker, but I didn't care. I just wanted to put distance between me and whatever that thing was. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept checking the mirror, expecting to see her running after me or standing in the middle of the road, or nothing, just the dark and the fog. After about 2 miles, I started to breathe again. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I told myself it was a woman in distress, a real woman, a living woman. Maybe she had some kind of medical condition that made her eyes look like that. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe I should have stopped. Maybe I was a coward. That's what I told myself. Then I hit the phrase straight strap. The fog thinned out, and for the first time in 10 minutes, I could see the road ahead. And about a quarter mile in front of me, standing in the middle of my lane, was the same woman. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, boxes flying forward from the back seat. The seatbelt cut into my chest. I came to a stop less than 20 feet from her. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there in the middle of the highway, wet dress dripping onto the asphalt, head tilted slightly now, as if she was curious about me. I put the car in reverse. My hand was shaking so badly I almost missed the gear shift. The backup camera flickered on, showing the dark road behind me, and that's when I saw that she wasn't alone. There were more of them. They were coming out of the trees on both sides of the road, not walking, just appearing. 1 second, there was empty fog. The next, there was a shape. A man in a soaked business suit. An old woman with her mouth open in a perfect O. A child, maybe 5 years old, standing in the middle of the white line. They all had the same wet clothes, the same blank faces, the same eyes that wouldn't close, and they were all facing me. I shifted into reverse and hit the gas. The car lurched backward, and for a second I thought I was free. Then the woman in the dress took a step forward, just one step, but it covered the entire distance between us. She was at my window. Her face was pressed against the glass. Up close, I could see that her skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent. I could see the dark shapes of things moving underneath, like eels coiling behind her flesh. She opened her mouth wider, not speaking, just opening, and something came out of her throat, not a sound, a smell. It was the smell of wet wool and cold dirt and something sweet, like rotting flowers. The smell filled my car instantly, and I couldn't breathe. Not because the air was gone, because my lungs wouldn't work. They had seized up, locked tight, as if my body had decided that breathing that air would be worse than dying. I closed my eyes. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't stand to look at her face anymore. Maybe because I thought that if I couldn't see her, she couldn't see me. I just squeezed my eyes shut and waited. The next thing I knew, I was parked on the shoulder of the road. The engine was still running. The heat was blowing at full blast, hot now, almost too hot. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles had gone white. I opened my eyes. The fog was gone. The road was empty. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, and on my passenger seat, there was a wet handprint on the upholstery. 5 fingers, a palm. It was the size of a small woman's hand. The fabric was damp, and when I touched it, my fingertip came away cold, not cool. Cold. The same kind of cold I'd felt before I saw her. I got out of the car. I stood in the middle of the empty highway and looked around. There were no cars, no houses, no lights, just the trees and the guardrail and the cracked asphalt. I walked back about 50 feet, and that's when I saw the curve. The same curve with the dented guardrail. I had driven that curve twice. Once before I saw her and once after, but I should have passed it only once. I was moving forward the whole time. I never turned around. There was no way I could have passed the same curve twice, but there it was. The same dent, the same rust stain, the same crooked reflector. I drove the rest of the way to my new apartment in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just watched the road and tried not to think about the handprint on the passenger seat. When I finally pulled into my parking lot, the sun was up, and for a few minutes I convinced myself that it had all been some kind of waking nightmare. Sleep deprivation, stress from the breakup, The mind plays tricks when you're exhausted. I grabbed the boxes from the back seat and carried them inside. I made coffee. I sat on my new couch and watched the morning news. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Then I went back to the car to get the last box, the one that had fallen behind the driver's seat. I reached into the footwell, and my hand touched something wet. I pulled it out. It was a child's shoe, a small white sneaker soaked through with a pink lace. I had never seen it before. I don't have kids. None of my friends have kids. There was no reason for that shoe to be in my car. I dropped it. It hit the floor mat with a wet slap, and then I heard it, faint, coming from somewhere behind me, not from the street, not from the apartment building, from the back seat of the car, a whisper. Just the shape of a whisper. It said my name. I spun around. The back seat was empty. No one was there. But the air in the car was cold again. And on the rear window, written in condensation, were 3 words. You saw me. I moved out of that apartment 3 months later. I live in a different state now. I don't drive at night. I don't drive through valleys. I don't listen to late night radio. And I never, ever look at my rear view mirror when I'm alone on a dark road. But here's the thing I can't explain. The thing I can't shake. Last week, I woke up at 3 in the morning because my bedroom was cold. Not cool, cold. I sat up in bed, and there on my nightstand, sitting right next to my phone, was a wet handprint. 5 fingers. A palm, the size of a small woman's hand. My windows were closed. My door was locked. And when I looked down at my own hands, they were dry. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat there in the dark, watching the corners of the room, listening to the silence. And somewhere around 4 in the morning, I thought I heard something. Not a whisper this time, just a breath, a slow, wet exhale, like someone who had been holding their breath for a very, very long time. I haven't found another handprint since then, but I've started finding other things. A strand of wet, dark hair on my pillow, a smell of cold dirt in my closet, and last night, when I walked past my bathroom mirror, I could have sworn that my reflection blinked a second too late. I'm telling you this because I think I need someone else to know. I think that maybe if I say it out loud, if I put it into words, it will stop following me. But even as I say that, I feel the temperature dropping in this room, and I swear I just saw the curtain move. There was no wind.